Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, England Center, Indianapolis Star, Mike Niziolek, Bloomington Herald Times. In State Farm Arena, the house Sharif Abdul-Rahim built.
He played
Indiana,
here?
he did.
That's a long time ago.
He got booed because he hit the game-winning shot in Jordan's last appearance in this building. Jordan's last game with the Wizards. Sharif
Oh, it was the
Abdul-Rahim
Wizards.
got booed because he won the game for the Hawks. And everyone see Jordan win the game. The Hawks have an up-and-down history, it's fair to say.
Nice arena.
No, it's a great arena, and it's been updated a lot. And
Yeah.
honestly, I think this is just what we should talk about for this
That-
video, because I don't think anybody
there's
wants to
not
hear us
much
talk
else
about
to talk
Auburn
about,
104,
yeah.
Indiana 76. Indiana's just done this too well. You know, Mike Woodson said he wanted these games. He wanted to play these kinds of teams and these kinds of venues. He wanted to challenge himself in the non-conference. And too often he's just, Arizona and Kansas last year, UConn, and now Auburn this year. Too often Indiana has just not stepped up to the level needed. And I guess what's particularly surprising was that Indiana looked like it was there. You wouldn't have expected them to keep shooting the way they did. They hit their first 4 threes, but they looked even defensively like they were there and they were prepared to sort of get through the fight and rebounding and all this thing. It was about the first 7-8 minutes of the game, and then Auburn slowed them down offensively, and they just caved in at the other end of the floor.
Well, you're stealing. I was going to say that's what Mike Woodson described it as caving in. Not a lot of fire in the second half. I thought that was probably disconcerting from his perspective.
Yeah.
He said they missed Xavier Johnson, and he was talking sort of about what he brings is on the floor. But I just thought his presence. He's one of those leaders that you can lean on in those moments, and because they didn't really have anybody that I thought that gathered them and said we got to fight through this because it was that tough stretch. They cut it down to 11 in the second half. Malik Renew came out, kind of had a bunch of baskets in the paint, and then Auburn hit a couple threes and it was over. It's never got close again, and they needed somebody in that moment to kind of settle the team down, and I just thought they didn't have it, and I think that's probably what you walk away with, kind of concerned that this team showed it. I think its youth today. Woodson said they showed wonderful signs early, but I think those were balanced out by some of the no fight in the second half.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, and I think you're probably right that there was nobody that could just kind of pull this team together and say everybody breathe, everybody steady. Let's just kind of. And in fairness, I think Indiana at times was good at that, even in like the UConn game where the shots weren't going in. But until the last,
Until Renew fouled out.
Yeah, until Malik Renew fouled out, Indiana was at least kind of they were clearly second best, but they were within touching distance. It felt like had to be those two post guys today, and Auburn had some length to throw at them. Auburn had some physicality to throw at them. I thought just in general, Auburn kind of set the terms of how this game was going to be played physically, and Indiana really didn't rise to it. And when Indiana, this is a game, obviously, we can talk about the three-point shooting. Indiana, 6 of 17. Those are both season highs, if I'm not mistaken, both makes and attempts, and still finishes with 8 fewer made threes because of how badly they kind of got burned on defense. But I also just thought you got to look today at what Indiana looks like when it doesn't have that post anchor. And when it doesn't have a post game at both ends of the floor, frankly, that it can sort of rely on and say, these guys are always going to give us a baseline, whether it's the stuff you can quantify or the stuff you can't, that we can kind of stand on, and then it's how much we can build on that in any given game. Their final lines aren't terrible. Renew and Ware combined for 28 points and 15 rebounds, but
And they finally got some offense from Gabe Cubs. He had 11 points. I think
but
that's
like
probably a season high.
In the stretches of the game where it mattered, it felt like either they weren't on the floor, which I think is a question from Mike Woodson's substitution patterns, although he's fair in saying you can't just burn them out. You can't just play them until they fall over. But I think it's also a question for basically just, Indiana's got to find more leaders, whether it's with words, with actions, whatever. But you can't just rely on those two guys all the time when you can't shoot the ball well enough to force opponents to space the floor and give them a lot of room to move.
Yeah, but I think what you've noticed is anytime Ware has gone out, especially in the first half for prolonged periods, Indiana kind of, especially offensively, just can't figure itself out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think fans are rightly kind of questioning, why he goes to 4 or 5 the bench guys at a time when the bench has not shown, maybe outside that Michigan game, that they could consistently score.
Yeah,
And so
I wonder if the Michigan game was in his mind today.
Yeah, that he thought that he could
get a little bit more, but yeah. No.
But that's sort of fool's gold. When that happens once in 8 games, you probably, that's not sort of enough consistency there. Being maybe more smart with Ware, trying to get him out for shorter times and getting him back in, because anytime he sits for a prolonged period, they see, and when this team loses it offensively, when they sort of, it's like when they get out of a rhythm, they really struggle getting back, you know, and so
It again feels like a shot maker's thing. They don't have
because they don't have it.
Yeah.
So they have to kind of, and like I think McKenzie and Baco is kind of the perfect example. When he's in the flow of the game, he looks really good, but once he gets out of it, he's sort of detached and doesn't do as much. And that's kind of, I think, like how this team plays. And so, I get that he can't play Ware and Renew 40 minutes a game, but he's got to probably change up a little bit the way he sort of mixes and matches lineups, how long he leaves them on the bench, or he's got to be quicker to get them back in when things start going in south, because this team, I think, is all about sort of right now having some momentum on the offensive side.
Well, and I think that also goes back to the idea of leadership and of somebody else, and yes, I think maybe where it's fair to say Indiana did miss Xavier Johnson he was the guy that could maybe change the pace of the game, the tempo of the game, and maybe could have kind of, shortened some of those stretches where like things got sort of out of control.
Some of those early games, he'd take a charge, or he had a couple. When those games were close, in the first couple of games they had, he made a play. And that really kind of rallied the team, and that was the moment. There was no moment like that today. They couldn't find.
Renew tried. Renew was clearly trying.
And that was the
early
stretch
in the
of the second half.
And that was kind of the last time. And you're probably right. It probably is concerning for Mike Woodson that it feels like his team just kind of fell over. And you sort of wonder, there was that, he wouldn't talk about the injury stuff much, and he said, we're not going to use it as an excuse. There was that long list of questionables, including a player who basically said he'd been sick on Tuesday night. And so you sort of wonder if maybe some of the effort, I'm not trying to absolve them, but there might not have been as much sort of fight back once the game started going in a certain direction. But in the overarching whatever, I think it was 19 points against Arizona last year, 22 or 24 against Kansas last year, 20 against UConn this year, 27, 28 in this one tonight or this afternoon.
Worst regular season loss.
Indiana,
first time, did you cover the first time they gave up 100 points in a regulation game that didn't go to overtime since 2016 against UNC? Were you at that game?
They beat UNC in 2016. Did it go over 100?
It was oh man, now did I get it wrong? Let's see.
Yeah. This is live on air admin. You're seeing it. They beat North Carolina. Maybe they gave up 100, but they definitely beat North Carolina in that game.
16.
They played in
16.
That was Duke, but they didn't give up 100. Oh yeah, that's not in the regular season. I thought we were talking regular season.
Okay.
Anyway, this is how the sausage is made. One way or the other, Indiana's got 7 days to sort of pull itself back together for Kansas, possibly get a little healthier. Gabe Cupps kind of said that the way to turn it into an advantage, and you hear this from probably through him from his coach, is to sort of take it on the chin together, pull together, and get better from it. And they will need to, because they can lose the Kansas game in the
but like
larger
we said,
thing.
in the
if
larger,
you put out this kind of effort in that game at home, it raises some serious questions.
Well, I think it just raises, how good is this team a tournament team? Is this team going to be at all competitive kind of against the top tier of the Big Ten?
Mm-hmm.
But record-wise, this is where you kind of expected them to be, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to say that they've, it's not a good effort, but they're at where they need to be right now.
I guess it's more in the sense like I think you lose to Kansas, you just can't lose like that at home in that game.
Fair.
I think that's kind of when you talk about them being a young team. We're kind of going long here, but you talk about them being a young team. That's fair, but the flip side to that is you can't just automatically assume a young team is going to keep getting mentally tougher. They need to work hard for it, and then they need to see the reward of it at some level somewhere. Maybe Kansas, may not. Anyway, we'll leave it there. One more time.
That was a big deep breath.
Auburn 104,
Indiana
76. I'm going to do a separate video where I just rap a lot.
Oh, good.
A little Crime Mob, a little Outcast. Hoosiers are 7-2. They're still 2-0 in the Big Ten, obviously. Will be for a while. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman for the Herald Times and the Star. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you soon.